The internet is cracked, the show that asks the question, can we coexist with our creation?
Hello, I'm Seth Camillo.
And I am Caroline Risberg, and we are The Internet is Cracked by Addicts for Addicts.
We are so lucky to have Dr. Mohammad Hossein Jarrahi, a professor of information science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He is known for his research on how artificial intelligence interacts with human work and organizations. Thank you so much, Professor, for being with us. We really, really, really appreciate it, and we are looking forward to an awesome conversation.
My pleasure to be here with you all.
Yeah, thank you. We really appreciate this. Um, so we want to ask you. So most people think that AI will take your job, and we are. I think that's something that we are all afraid of. But how might AI actually enhance somebody's job?
We've been grappling with this type of question for every single time that a transformational technology, disruptive technology
Mm-hmm.
comes along. We've been seeing this with, let's say, internet, right? The rise of internet. So a very quick note, there are three categories, three types of changes. A group of jobs will go away. We know that some jobs will be replaced by um, the technology-based automation that happened with the internet revolutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like many agents, they lost their job or they became less important in adding values, like travel agents. The
Oh
second
yeah.
group are the jobs that will be created. We've seen all these really interesting jobs, social media influencers, web designers, web programmers, all these new jobs that have been created as a result of the technological innovation. And then most jobs will fall in the third categories. They will not go away in a wholesale manner. They will not be recreated. They'll be transformed. Okay. And the
Mm-hmm.
transformation happens in two ways. A number of tasks will be automated, a number
Mm-hmm.
of tasks will be augmented, and a number of
Mm-hmm.
tasks needs to be done that they did not exist before. So our jobs, vast majority of what they call knowledge workers, they'll fall in the third category. Now,
Mm-hmm.
uh, back to your specific questions, there are things that will be augmented. We'll be able to do things that we were not able to do. And of course, there are things that we should stop doing. They'll be automated, they'll be scraped away from our core jobs, core activities. But I think that really excitement comes from the concept of augmentation. What can be, and augmentation is not a very well defined concept. That's the
Mm-hmm.
problem. It means different things to different communities, and the manifestation of augmentation across different categories, different types of jobs, different types of knowledge work contexts look very different.
What does it mean to you? Why don't you give us the definition that you use
Yeah.
in your work?
So doing things faster, okay? That's
Okay.
augmentation. But spending less time on less meaningful type of work. All of us been grappling with bureaucratic procedures. So I'm a professor. Every trip I go, I have to fill out. I'm associated with a state university, a public institution.
Mm-hmm.
Because of all these, uh, compliances, I have to fill out forms that every time I do, I ask, why am I doing this? Right?
Mm.
Why am I filling out the was it tax distribution for the hotel? Why am I looking at these receipts? So these are the things, these are the important aspects of my job. And I imagine any other knowledge workers that do not add much value to the core of what I'm doing. It's not a source of learning. It's not meaningful. It's just drudgery that can be automated. So to me, augmentation is a lot of folks think automation is the opposite of augmentation. I think automation of some of these mundane tasks is a very good first step for augmentation, which means I spend less time on things that are not really important. And we are doing this on everyday basis. You can imagine things that, shuffling files, looking for files, Microsoft Windows, if you use it, it's not the most intuitive, system. If AI can help us with some of these really I mean, I don't need to learn some of these file management systems and whatnot, or bureaucratic procedures. If the system can automate those, I can spend more time on more meaningful aspects of my work. So number one is automating drudgery, automating, replacing things that do not need to be done by a human being. Number two is making things faster, efficiency, right?
Mhm.
Writing has become, that's part of my job. Coding is part of programmers, more technical folks' job. This definitely, these two types of, examples have been accelerated massively, right? And of course, one thing I want to emphasize, and hopefully we'll talk about, is while some of this efficiency is created, um, some of our agency and creativity can go away. So we understand the downside, but efficiency is an important part of the game. AI systems can make us much more efficient. And number three is doing things that were not possible before. It's not just about making things faster or automating less useful aspects of our work, but doing things that we were not able to do. Like a very good example of it is translation. At this point, uh, for reading a lot of documents, you don't need to know the core, the original language, right? That is becoming much, much easier compared to, like, say, 5 years ago. So that's an
Mhm.
example of things, that's an example, a subset of augmentation. Doing things that were not possible before this technological revolution.
What do you think about implementation? Is there a way to responsibly implement, or should we be just let market forces, um, do the implementation for us as it will?
So the answer is no. Of course, there are what we call AI. I mean, in terms of this specific technology, AI, we need to have AI guardrails in place. The technology comes with very clear problems. And I want to emphasize some of these problems may not go away. They're not necessarily fixable. The problem of hallucination, right? We know that generative AI systems cannot be fully reliable. They are not engine of truth. They make things up. And one thing I
Mhm.
emphasize in conversation with people, hallucination is not necessarily a bug, it's a feature of these systems. So if you bring it down, if you want to make it zero, the creativity of the system won't go down. So we are always grappling with these what are called design trade-offs, right? Where to put the trade-off and find the best balance. In that sense, you cannot just rely on technology and those people who supply the technology for a responsible use implementation. Every single organization, and I would say every single individual, this is not just an organization. I study, the impact of these systems and implementation of in organizational context. But every single user has to be educated enough about the upsides and downsides of these systems. So it's an individual and organizational responsibility. Um,
Mhm.
Back to your question, the system should not be the sole driver of implementation.
Right. But now when everything goes so fast and when you at home and maybe you trusting the systems, let's say, right? I mean, we are not, I mean, I think a lot of us are not educated enough in how it actually really works, if that makes sense.
If you spend some of our time fighting and curbing these technology rather, and then spend that instead on figuring out how to educate people pragmatically.
Well, that actually brings up a question that
Mhm.
that I have, which is what jobs do you feel work well even as A AI gets, better and better? What jobs still collaborate well with a really high functioning AI?
Um, so I've written this piece. I've talked about two types of. I'd be happy to share. It was published in Harvard Business Review in 2023. Still very valid, I guess, with the rise of AI's capabilities. Um, I've talked about two important set of skills from the human and AI perspective, but I'm focusing on the human perspective. What I call cooperative skills and
Mhm.
competitive skills. So this framework help us understand how jobs, how individuals, how organizational work contexts interact with AI systems. And which, back to your question, which ones are more viable, which one will be less viable in the face of AI intrusion. So every single humans, and in this context, in the as a worker, need to provide some competitive advantage in relation to AI, something that AI systems cannot do meaningfully competently. Anything that
Mhm.
requires high level of emotional intelligence, anything that requires social intelligence, working with other humans. So you can imagine, like, if you look at the list of jobs that uh, are subjected to AI, jobs that are exposed to AI, teachers, mentors, early childhood education, instructors, workers, they're least exposed to AI system because that requires a lot of human to human center interaction. You can't
Mm.
let little kids, even I would say university students, just interact with AI instructors. They can be useful, but the core of human interaction is how learning happens, right? Mentorship, all of these important concepts we've been working
Mm.
for millennia. So any job that requires high level of emotional intelligence, that's very viable, still viable. Um,
Mm.
that's what I call the competitive skills. Cooperative skills are in relationship to AI. At the same time, you need to be able to work with AI systems. Even the most human-centered context of work, education, you name it, you need to develop cooperative skills. And cooperative skills are not human to human. It's about human AI interaction. Uh, Moving forward, one of the most important skills that we need to develop is asking the right questions. And asking the right question require multiple set of competency. Asking the right question from AI systems. The AI systems sometimes cannot give you the questions. But if you get the AI system to answer the right question, that's half of the problem. So how would that happen? Number one, I think we still need people with deep domain expertise. You need to understand what's going on. Deep contextual understanding. Um, my feeling is still today, these systems have very narrow understanding of specific contexts. All these, and a lot of it are social dynamics, right? Different types of stakeholders. If I write this email to these 5 people, I need to understand their mental model, and their mental model, a lot of it, we are entering the realm of tacit, implicit understanding of social fabric of the organization. How can I phrase something that basically strikes the right balance between these 5 people? One of them is a manager, the other one is my coworker,
Mhm. Mhm.
the other one is a partner. And we know in organizations for a fact, not everyone's objective can be maximized. Actually, they are against each other. They are at odds with each other. This is
Expand on that. Expand on that.
so a very simple example of this. I've studied the gig economy, algorithmic management in the gig economy. So in the gig economy, you have at least a couple of very obvious stakeholders. And this applies to many businesses pretty much. You have the platform owner, Uber or Upwork. You do have the provider of the service, drivers, or freelancers in the case of Upwork, and you do have the clients, passengers. So if you make one of them very happy, the other one is naturally unhappy, right?
Right.
If you make the rides very cheap, who's where did you get the money? What are you sacrificing, right?
Right.
Basically, the value of your shareholders of Uber will not be as happy, and the customer, the riders will not be as happy. So it's always about finding the right balance. This is a very simple, context, but you can
Mhm.
imagine any organizational, any serious work environment, you have multiple stakeholders whose interests are at odds with each other. There's no way you can maximize it. And this is the core of what we call the bounded rationality framework. You cannot maximize everyone's objective in the decision making. So this is a very important human-centered understanding that comes with the power of convincing others. So it's not so much about sometimes you make decisions that are hard, but you have the ability to go and talk to different stakeholders and tell them, let's meet in the middle. I know that, I understand your position, but I have to do this. Next time, I'll give you a break. So all of these important organizational dynamics, I think, will collapse when we are talking about human AI interaction at the individual level. Moving forward, back to your question, um, jobs, position, roles in organizations. I mean, we can't, one of the biggest problem here is we say software engineers, and software engineers are not, they are created, they're not all equal, right? Software engineers in JP Morgan Chase would be very different from software engineers in Google as a technical organizations, right? And even within the same organization at different levels in different departments, they occupy very different roles and very different, they are embedded in very different social relationships. So sometimes when we come up with these lists, we reduce everything into specific job position, which is problematic, right? If you Many software engineers do a lot of requirement analysis. They need to talk to different stakeholders.
Mhm.
Of course, there are similarities. I wouldn't question the common ground among all these technical folks, right? But they come in different shapes and forms. Now, going back to your question, it really depends on how people position themselves, but certain professions are more likely to be replaced or a bigger share of their job likely to be, automated by a system. We know that.
I hear or I've seen like people saying like, "Oh yeah, they started with AI in our company and they want us to basically not to teaching it, but a sort of, but then after a while they realize that they got replaced by it." Like the companies are y- start to designing, I don't know if it's designing, but they're designing the AI basically to maybe replace or instead for support them. That's what I keep hearing that people have said or saying. Um, I mean, what do you say about that?
So I would imagine a lot of folks fall within the first category that I mentioned, right? And
Mhm.
technical folks are definitely not immune from that. Some of the early programmers of ChatGPT that make redundant by OpenAI, they developed the system, but they were replaced by their own creation, right? And we know that in some domains, these systems are making really huge inroads, huge transformation. Um, but one thing I want to emphasize, a lot of narrative today is driven by what I call the efficiency uh, narrative, efficiency, understanding, which means making things faster, right?
Mhm.
Um, and making things less problematic. Humans are often source of problems, right?
Mhm.
AI systems, hallucinate AI systems have all sorts of, uncertainty. They come with unpredictable behaviors and whatnot. But humans are the most unpredictable I mean, you can just look at the types of 60, 70 types of biases that we are subject to when they make decisions. The simplest
Mm.
one is you have a row with your partner the night before. The next day you reject all the applications.
Yeah. Uh,
Sorry.
Or you just uh, you know, the first time I watched The Office, which turned out to be one of my favorite shows of all time, I
Mhm.
asked my wife because she had watched it before. I said, "What's wrong between Toby and Michael?" And of course, there are
Mhm.
reasons for it, but my wife said he just hates his gut. Michael hates him. Interpersonal conflict, whatever that he says, he just hates it, right? Um, and that impacts his decision making, interaction, and whatnot. AI systems are not the same as human. Yes, they are biased. We understand that. So the
Mhm.
efficiency narrative said make it cheaper, faster, and with less conflict and all these types of interpersonal issues, right?
Mhm.
There is a big problem, and we've seen it for the last. This is not again. I want to emphasize with this round automation, there are something that are inherently, genuinely new. We shouldn't question that the AI systems. This is probably the first time that automation technologies are coming after white collar knowledge workers. This did not happen so much in the past.
well, I think there's also
Mm.
something that we're asking of you, which is this crystal ball. And probably when cars started to be adopted, you kind of would maybe get a sense like if your job is to shoe horses, well, maybe that's not gonna last so long. But if you think of all the ways that cars have infiltrated the economy and our personal lives, nobody could have predicted that in the
Mm.
20s.
Yes.
And I think it's probably pretty hard to know exactly. Also, we don't know the end capabilities, like you're talking about hallucinations, and I mean, we don't know exactly what AI is gonna look like in 20 years as well. So I think
True.
it's difficult, to ascertain exactly what will be replaced. That's obviously the first thing that comes to people's mind because they're frightened, right?
Yes.
Right.
And they're changing. We are changing too.
Yes.
I've been teaching at this point different. I don't want to emphasize or overemphasize the distinction between generations. But since you've been also looking at a distraction, AI, what do you call it, internet crack and whatnot, the new generation, the generation Z and who comes after them, they are qualitatively different from the previous generation. And I don't want to
Right.
say honestly they're bad or worse or like smarter. They're just different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are changing. And going back to the example of cars, I want to emphasize one thing I wanted to say was things are different, but at the same time similar.
Mm-hmm.
We can learn
Mm-hmm.
from the previous generations of automation. Not everything is totally different because at the end, what matters, if you go back to the example of cars, is the hyphen, human machine interaction, the hyphen between human and machine, right? Cars,
Mm-hmm.
since 60s and 70s, every decades we had the prospect of self-driving cars. We do have them today, but humans are not completely out of the loop for many, many, many different reasons, right? So some of the
Mm-hmm.
most interesting uses and applications of cars, humans have been completely ingrained, implicated in those applications. Humans were part of those applications, and humans change their habits, their behaviors, right? You can tell after the rise of cell phones, particularly the smartphones, humans are less attentive. I don't know what they were. I mean, people are being distracted, right? That's just the downside. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I would say in the age of AI, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 20 years, 30 years. These systems are expanding their capabilities. But since we've in human social sciences, we've been studying humans, and we know that there are aspects of human decision making. There are important aspects of human intelligence that is probably not replaceable by AI system, right?
Mm.
It doesn't matter how smart these systems can get. And some of it has to do with the way that these systems are trained. They're not, some of our conversations, narratives are driven by these voodoo understanding of AI. AI systems just, you know, come up with these magical capabilities. That's not true. Um, there are specific regimes and ways that these systems develop their learning. And some
Mm.
of it overlaps with us, some of it exceeds by far our capability, but some of it does not necessarily mimic our capability, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can give you examples if the time allows us. There are areas that I don't think will become machines' capability, and are kind of unique to humans.
Tell us about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell
Yeah.
us tell us what you believe is something that an AI cannot and will not be able to replace in terms of not a job, in terms of the human brain and its capacity to create and interpret.
So there are areas, I would say one of the first one from my own research is intuitive decision making. So in
Mm-hmm.
we've been studying humans decision making for many years. Not me, but I mean the whole community of decision scientists and psychologists. Uh, a very simple dichotomy is analytical decision making and intuitive decision making. Analytical decision making is driven by data. It's
Mm-hmm.
meticulous. It's you go out, you collect data, you analyze them, with discipline, and you can justify. The process is complicated, but it's visible, and it's something that can be made explicit to people who understand the process. And you can actually justify your decision based on the specific steps you've taken. It's very systematic. And machines have been immensely helpful. AI systems are very good with analytical decision making, what we call reducing the complexity of decision. There is a second type of decision making, and they're not mutually exclusive. It's intuitive decision making. And this comes from years of internalized experience. In the lay
Mm-hmm.
language, we call it business instinct, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
even simpler, gut feeling.
Mhm.
When you ask you as an expert in areas in your own specific domain, why did you make this decision? And the decision was actually, it made sense. Sometimes the answer is, it just sounds right. It just felt
Yeah.
right. But that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that it is haphazard. It doesn't mean that it's arbitrary. Or gut feeling, it doesn't come from your gut. It comes from years of internalized experience, exposure
Mm.
to different type of experiences that you cannot even explain it. This also has a lot of overlap with the concept of tacit knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You can only get that data if you are a human, and an AI cannot hope to get that data because it is, by definition, not a human.
Absolutely. And that decision
Mm.
making happens typically in the realm of subconscious. And that's one of the reasons that you cannot explain it. Even to someone
Mm.
who is an expert, doesn't have as much as expertise as used, but um, this is the way that a lot of high level managers, CEOs, strategic decision making happens, right? It's not based on one set of data or a stream of data. It's about a holistic understanding of what's going to happen. And this is what we call that. I said in the first situation, the analytical decision making useful for complexity, dealing with complexity when you have too many moving parts. If you have enough data, you can actually reduce the complexity and come up with the most optimal decision. The second type of decision making, intuitive decision making, is when you are dealing with what we call uncertainty of decision making. When you lack
Mm.
enough information about now, and more important than that, in the future. So let's bring this to the domain of machine learning. Uh, when I said a lot of people do not understand the vast majority of machine learning techniques, this is an important example. Machines, there are variations of AI, techniques like reinforcement learning and whatnot, but the most interesting ones come from deep learning, right? That is based on precedent. When the system sits through a lot of data and train itself based on the precedent, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
precedent-based decision making, precedent-based learning. We do that the same goes with human, right? But one thing about human which is unique is sometimes you make decision in the face of you don't have any precedent. This happened during COVID. Some of the supply chain management systems shut off because they had not seen anything like this before. There was no precedent at that scale, or at least we didn't have. We might have had the Spanish flu, right? But we didn't
Right.
have enough data to understand what is the best management of Walmart inventory in the face of this global pandemic. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where the human judgment kicks in. And a lot of decision making in the intuitive realm, again, has to do with human social intelligence. If I go down the route B or A, how different stakeholders will react to this? Am I able to convince important stakeholders in my decision making? A very good example of this is Steve Jobs. A lot of Steve Jobs' decision making, if you, there are people who have written about his intuitive style of decision making, when sometimes he dismissed extensive analytical data center research and went with his gut. And we know for a fact that Steve Jobs was not just a technologist or designer or whatnot. He was a very good marketing strategist, right? A person who was able to convince masses that this is the product that you need. Uh, convince his stakeholders, stockholders, that this is the route to take. And that requires a lot of intuitive socially intelligent decision-making processing.
I mean, what kind of decisions should never be handed to an AI or fully handed in all of this?
Any decision that is ethically charged or it comes one of the ways that, back to your question, Seth, and hopefully this is helpful in relation to Caroline's question. Um, one of the ways that we learn differently, we see consequences to our action.
Mm,
Consequences
I
are
like
very
that.
important part of our learning processes, right? AI systems can see some of the consequences, but they don't feel it personally individually, right?
Right, right.
If you let someone to get hurt in a medical procedure, next time you'd be cautious. That
Right.
consequence as a medical professional will impact you and impact your conversation, impact your decision making, all of that. AI systems do not have the same feeling of consequence. Yes, they might. Some of the training is based on awards and whatnot, but that's not personal feeling of consequence.
Good point.
this is actually the first time that I heard somebody say something that I truly believed an AI could not replicate, because that is
I
actually,
agree.
uh, as you were speaking, there are times you're saying, well, it's an intuition. And I'm like, well, maybe a more complex or more developed AI can
Mhm.
develop intuition, etc. But what you're saying about how we learn, yeah, I have friends who are doctors who've had quote unquote bad outcomes, and those bad outcomes stay with them for the rest of their professional and actually personal lives. And that's something that ChatGPT is just not going to feel if it makes the wrong decision and, I end up getting hurt or passing away because of it. That's uniquely human.
And along the same
Mm.
line, that's a great point. I want to emphasize that these systems are good sometimes as simulations, simulating things. So we know
Mhm.
for a fact large language model have been immensely successful in human AI interaction because of what I call anthropomorphic behavior,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? They
Oh,
make
yeah.
Yeah.
they make you believe that they do have an internal emotional state. And
Yeah.
and some of it is by design, right? We do
Yeah.
have research that shows that these systems, and in your personal interaction, you've seen it. Like the other day, I asked
Yeah.
Cloud something, and Cloud say, "In my opinion, I feel like all of that is just markers, language markers that make you believe you're talking to someone like yourself. The system does not understand the consequence. The system does not have any feeling. It's just simulation of all of those, and that can be confusing."
Yeah.
Because you get that feeling of sympathy, empathy, and whatnot from someone who
Mm.
from a creature that just simulates it.
And that brings me to a point I want to ask you about, is about outsourcing parts of our brain, which I feel like I am starting to do. And in the importance of putting the phone down, putting the AI away, and doing things on your own, because it's more than efficiency. Because every time you rely, okay, I'm making a claim that I don't know to be true, but I feel like there is a feeling I have that every time I depend on ChatGPT to make a decision or to create something for me, I am losing an opportunity to learn and flex my muscles, and those muscles begin to atrophy.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that is a good hypothesis. I don't think that's not reasonable. Um, we learn through frictions. When things break down, that's human nature, right? Some of these,
Right.
the system, a lot of the affordances of generative AI systems remove friction. Like when things are too smooth, you're not gonna learn. Skill atrophy, cognitive atrophy. We've been doing that for many years. Let's recognize that the spelling, right? You're not paying attention to spelling. Um, when it comes to social media, you guys been, studying, looking at social media, attention span, right?
Mhm.
Reading something longer, engaging with something longer and critically understanding it without switching to the next one after, and emotionally charged, because sometimes the algorithm sends you something that is uh of importance to you. You either hate it or you really love it, right? So all of these have been basically degrading our cognitive abilities, right? We don't spend enough time reading, digesting, understanding different aspects of text, content, whatever it is. And now writing, a lot of writing, in my case and my students, being uploaded, outsourced to AI systems, right? Um,
Mhm.
Now, what does that mean? It means, we are not flexing our muscles. We are not going on cognitive treadmills, because treadmills by definition are giving you friction, right? Make you life,
Yeah.
you sweat. And through that sweat, you develop your muscles. The same goes with cognitive. If you're not able to critically engage with something, if you are just removing all the difficult aspects of your work, this is one of the biggest challenges of educating the next or training the next generation of knowledge workers. Vast majority of tacit learning comes through problem solving.
Mhm.
If
Mhm.
you are not given little problems in early days of your education when you're a novice, how can you get to the level that you are able to solve the strategic problems? Right? Someone has been doing it. We've been seeing this with affluent families, right? The kids being shielded. Now, our kids everyone is being shielded cognitively to some extent. We learn through
Yeah.
problems and challenges, friction.
I feel a sense, not to give away my age, but that I grew up without the internet or AI. My initial training, university training, was in grade school and all that. I value the fact that at least I may be offloading my brain to AI, but at least I'm aware that I'm doing it. Whereas I think
Mm.
the generation that grows up with it may not even be aware of that a treadmill exists and that they should be sweating.
Absolutely. And one thing
Yeah.
that they're digital natives, right? I am it. I mean, I'm the oldest digital natives generation, 82.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
um, it- giving you my age, and now,
Yeah.
what I want to say is, in terms of friction and things that opportunity for learning, this is not directly related to AI, but something that you guys can completely, sympathize with is boredom. When you get bored,
Yeah.
this is when the
Yeah.
dots connected in your brain, right? When you don't have,
Mhm.
like my kids, they have very little understanding, exposure, experience of boredom,
Mhm.
right? Because there's always a constant barrage of information coming at you from your device, and you don't get a time to disconnect. And when you're bored, just see things that, when the creativity comes when you get bored. I can tell you, right? Because then you get the opportunity to think about things that you've been, seeing, some of these signals, right? Now, AI systems also taking some of that away, because our education, even the blue book, right? That source of I mean, I had this conversation with some of my colleagues. I said, "What are you simulating with a sitting exam?" He said, "A stress under time constraints." Even if these guys are not gonna do in their future career something like that. But that's an important source of friction, right? Am I
Yeah.
able to put my thoughts together during an hour and retrieve information? Of course, that comes with a lot of things that are not really useful for the future career. But um, AI is taking away some of these frictions, right? You're not learning writing. Writing has been the good understanding. Writing is thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say something about writing. What I have started seeing what people do, they don't spell out with younger spelling out the full words anymore. Like now they just dictate like there's emojis, or whatever you call it. There is all kind of different like so you don't even write sentences anymore. You do like just because you said with spelling out that I think a lot of stuff start. getting cut off because we want to be faster. We
Mhm.
don't need, anyway, yeah. I just want to say that.
I mean, that's writing is a very interesting context to study our cognitive capability, right?
Mm-hmm.
And technology has had immense amount of influence, impact in our writing situation. Us as older generation and these guys, right, who were born with TikTok and
Yeah.
some of these social media. Um, One thing I want to emphasize, Seth, because you asked this question earlier, what is it that is human centric, right? I think a very important aspects that still is human centric and doesn't go away with the rise of AI is a very interesting form of creativity. These systems, I want to emphasize, they can be creative. I'm not questioning their creativity. But their
Mm-hmm.
creativity is, if I want to give you a metaphor, it's this really, really big box of data that humanities have generated over thousands of years. And these systems have ingested it through text, through data, through books, everything that they've been trained on,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Humans' creativity is different. In a lot of senses, so they can find connection between variables within this huge, humongous box, right? Within this box, two variables like Picasso said something, and today this philosopher in Australia said something, connect these and coming up with a
Oh,
new
what
answer.
what you're basically saying in a certain way is I create art from 0.00000001% of the data that, ChatGPT has. But we arrive at so we're gonna arrive at different ways of expressing ourselves.
Exactly. So we do not, I mean, I said it earlier, there are capabilities that are completely unprecedented. We should give up or we should be aware of it. Like this big, massive processing analytical capability, connecting dots within this humongous box of human generated data. So one thing I want to emphasize, this data came from human. The AI systems, they can do synthetic, data, they can create synthetic data, but vast amount of inferences come from things you, Seth, and Caroline generated through books, Wikipedia entry, and whatnot, right? So that's a very
Mm-hmm.
important thing to recognize. But they're all within this big box. Human creativity sometimes, so to speak, is outside of the box thinking.
Yes.
When things
Mm-hmm.
do
Yeah.
not make any sense, right? Connecting dots, a dot within the box and outside of the box. Some of the best artistic expression, they border absurdity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because this person is pushing the boundaries, is thinking outside. One really important point, if you look at a lot of innovations of the past, many of them went against the common knowledge of the day.
Well, many artists are not
Mm.
appreciated till years and years after their deaths, and that's
True.
because the complexity of what they have created was perhaps just so great that nobody could understand it at the time.
Absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
you know what happened within that 30, 40 years? The box was a stretch.
Yeah.
So now there are
Yeah.
still inside the box of humanity and human creativity, right? But
Mm.
and art is very subjective. But let's talk about innovations, right? Things that were functional. A lot of them during the time frame of their own creation, they were deemed crazy because they were going against the common knowledge understanding within the box of human thinking and literature and science.
Mm-hmm.
But they were able to push it because many of these scientists, they were crazy, right? The best example of it is this woman that was so influential in mRNA vaccine. She wasn't granted the Eastern European woman, right? The scientist who was given recently Nobel Prize in medicine. She wasn't given, she was in one of these Ivy Leagues, if I'm not mistaken, Princeton or UPenn. She wasn't granted tenure there because her idea was so far-fetched that did
Uh-huh.
not align
Oh.
with the knowledge of the day, which was very very focused on a specific type of vaccine and whatnot, right? But she was actually very, very innovative in coming up with the first, innovation behind mRNA vaccines. Years later, decades later, she got the Nobel Prize, right? So this is a very common approach in humanities. Now, what does that mean? A lot of creativity that comes from these machines are very homogeneous. So if you ask, give it a try. Sometimes you ask the same question from Claude and ChatGPT. The answers are very similar, even though they were dealing with two different systems. Even the words are similar. We don't know what's going on under the hood, but one really important point I can give you, this is an anecdotal experience, right? I have this exam where students applied certain concept from the book to explain a case, which is the Office Space movie. The Office Space movie. A completely
Okay.
dysfunctional
Okay. Yeah.
organization. You can relate to it because it's an old, I love it. It has a lot for you to analyze, right? The organization is completely broken along thousands of dimensions. So I ask a student to go to the book and pick some concepts, and that's part of the deal, because half of the deal is finding the right concept that analyzes the examples and evidence from the movie. Now, after 2022, the concepts are very convergent. A very few handful of concepts get picked up. And it was very bizarre because that never happened before. And you know what the reason is?
What?
Because
No.
ChatGPT picked those concepts for them. It converged into a couple of concepts. Later on I wrote into the assignment, if I keep seeing very similar concept, I doubt that you did this assignment by yourself. 2 or 3 concepts are completely overrepresented in their assignments. Because ChatGPT, the concepts are completely fitting, right? But it's homogeneous.
And I've seen a video of a professor livid showing the distribution of grades before ChatGPT and then showing the distribution of grades after. And he said, I can't identify you individually, but as a whole, you are hurting yourself because you have all cheated. At least the majority of you have, because the distribution proves it.
I mean, I can see it firsthand. So the M dash and the words like delve, if you look at the content being generated today, are massively overrepresented, right? Because these systems generate, and that's just like the tip of the iceberg. I mean, that there's nothing wrong with overusing these terms, right? But it's just
Right.
like certain type of thinking that is being just perpetuated through the writings of different individuals. And, this is problematic because if these systems are using the same data to retrain themselves, if basically it becomes eating your own exhaust.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that becomes a closed circle, right? These systems were massively smart because the data that they used before 2021, that was vastly, predominantly human generated, right? Over the web, that was a training ground. Can you say the same thing with the new data that is coming on the web, on LinkedIn? Look at the LinkedIn posts, right?
Yeah. And you can actually, like, now, whatever you're looking at, you can tell people's posts, people's things is all ChatGPT or whatever you see. Like it's. I have a question about this that I'm actually keep thinking of is okay, we older, or I'm older, and we did have our, or I did have my, talking to me form is better, like my experience in life and what I, all of this, and like we were talking about earlier, and I'm thinking about the younger generation that now are growing up with ChatGPT and don't study the same way maybe we did. I'm not saying that maybe that was the better way we were studying. I don't want to be like that, but one thing that made me think of is psychology. And I used to say before, I think that being a psychologist, that never going to disappear. That job, we're always going to need face to face, be with somebody talking. But now I start seeing people going to ChatGPT to talk to a psychologist. So then I'm just started thinking, what is the new generation if that's going to be how we are communicating? That we are putting that much trust into those machines that I don't know. I mean, it just I'm just thinking a lot about like what is because it's going fast and that's a different school now than it was when I grew up. And they're learning differently. They're seeing things differently. And this is maybe the new norm that we talk into that chat box who is gonna help me, guide me through my life and whatever I'm going through. What's your thoughts about all of that?
That's a great point. So going back to something I said earlier, there are things that are the same from similar to past. There are things that are different. So in the past, if
Mm-hmm.
as your parents or grandparents' generation, they were very unhappy with some of our habits, interaction with TV, with the
Right.
internet and whatnot, right? Every generation is
Yeah.
basically beholden is attached to certain type of technology, right? There were radio, TV, and now no one even watches TV, right? They're all
Right.
combined, condensed into one device. Now,
Right.
so some of it is we are concerned, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that humanity can be fine. I don't think, we're gonna, a singularity happens or, we become dumb because we are very adaptive. These systems are becoming adaptive, and we are, as human race, we are very adaptive. So I have high hopes there. But going
Mm-hmm.
back to the things that are new, there are things that are new, and we need to engage with it. This is different from TP. This is different from Internet Web point one, Web 2.0, right? This is different, qualitatively different. The example that
Mm-hmm.
you brought up, uh, different studies shows one of the most important uses of generative AI systems is for counseling, companionship, and
Mm-hmm.
open is very important psychologically oriented, affordances, right?
Mm-hmm.
And uh, some of it can be helpful. A lot of folks do not have access to counselors. They need someone to listen to them without judging, their
Mm-hmm.
past, their
Yeah.
behaviors, and whatnot. But there are inherent danger to it. So when I said we need to understand the behaviors of these systems, one of the major behaviors is the concept of sycophancy. These systems, particularly ChatGPT, they're sycophant. They're too agreeable,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and this is, that is problematic across the board because it feeds into a confirmation bias.
Yeah.
ChatGPT figures out your characteristics, your inclination,
Mm-hmm.
and basically reinforces your biases. If you are not aware of it, if you not know how to use it. In a couple of cases, at least one of them I remember, Guardian covered that the boy unfortunately took his life.
Right. Right.
This is like, I think 6 months ago. And when
Mm-hmm.
they look at the chats and whatnot, um, the boy was, of course, in a very difficult situation, right? He was suicidal. He was underage. All these are red flags. And the system, ChatGPT, told the boy that the world is such a dark place. It does not understand and recognize you. So
Mm.
basically, you belong to a better place, right? This is problematic, right? If the system and the system does not, when I say, it can't simulate our behavior, our sympathy, and whatnot, that doesn't mean that it has the capability of a counselor, right? Definitely, like some
Right.
humans will not qualify to give people advice, right? Let alone a
Exactly.
system. And that was definitely a driver for the boy to take his life.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, so these are qualitatively different. These are the first time that we are dealing with machines that have capabilities of human in interaction, but sometimes a facade of capability, right? When I said domain
Mm-hmm.
expertise matter, even so in the age of AI, a counselor can, there are strategies to integrate some of these generative AI systems, not necessarily the open ones, but the specialized one to augment the counseling processes. But
Mm.
humans have to stay in the loop because there are, said earlier, you asked, what is it that the system has to do? There are areas that you cannot, if 1% something happens, that is too much. Not to say that humans are not careless, right? But at
Right.
least you need to have some form of accountability. You need to have some form of human intelligence, human interaction.
Well, do you think we can handle it in terms of the power? I mean, what is it? What is, what the power structure in the C-suites and all over the world? How is this going to play out? Is it going to spread power out among people, or is it going to cluster it among the few?
My feeling, again, some of it is driven by our research of the past. Technologies like this reinforce the power structure. They might transform them a little bit, right? Today, some of the wealthiest people on the face of the planet are technology, providers. These were
Mm.
not the case like 40 years ago. This was ExxonMobil of the world, right? Some of these changes have happened, right? But eventually,
Right.
these technologies come with a specific ideology and a specific norms. Some of them are by design. Some of them are just the training.
If if we can get the human AI collaboration right, what could it look like if we could actually make it right? So we can work together with AI and
Very good, but difficult question. So I often use the term, this is my term, and I think I didn't know what it meant when I used it first time, but now I feel that was the right use. Human AI symbiosis, so, which is
Mm.
inspired by biology, right? There are important premises and foundations in that term. Number one, uh, humans and AI cannot replace each other. So this
Mhm.
messes with a lot of fear, what they call let me just remember what the term anthropocentric dismissal, which means, this is a fad. AI is going to go away. AI is going to make us dumber. AI is the problem. Let's shut it off. Let's just get rid of the technology. I think we're past that point, right?
Right.
Anthropocentric dismissal is not going to work. AI is viable. AI is not going to go away. The same can be said about humans.
Mm.
In biology, symbionts are not replacing each other. Number one. Number two, they are inherently different. We recognize that they come with different capabilities. Otherwise, there is no complementarity. The complementarity comes from different capabilities. So that's the second point. The third is the two can achieve more than each of them alone. That is the system beyond each of them, right? They have to work
Mhm.
together. Again, this brings us back to the biggest part of the problem, but also the opportunity, which is the hyphen. The most difficult thing we got to figure out moving forward is the hyphen. Not what is it that human can do, not what is it that AI can do. How can we work together? What are the things that, going back to another thing I said earlier, cooperative skills, competitive skills, there are things that we should drop. There are things that we should drop from our educational system. We lost that game, right? There are
Yeah.
things that we should emphasize. So you'd be surprised. Some of the humanity, social sciences are actually much more important today because that is our human competitive
Mm.
advantage, right? Some
Mhm.
of the STEMs over the last 20, 30 years, we've been overemphasizing STEM. I don't say STEM is going to go away, right? But, all these, buzzes about human sciences, useless, philosophy, useless, psychology, useless. We come at a time that, they're actually more important, right? Because AI
Good.
system cannot compare some of those areas and those, sciences. Now, is the hyphen, human AI symbiosis, the hyphen is the most important, difficult, the $1 trillion question to figure out. It's not thinking about AGI. So I said earlier, this camp is about anthropocentric dismissal. The opposite is AGI maximalists.
Explain AGI.
Yeah.
Artificial general intelligence. Let's come up with a system that basically does not require human and basically mimics replace all humans. That's the goal of a lot of Silicon Valley technologists, right? And people who are cheerleaders are not just technologists. All these, I'm on LinkedIn, I see all these posts that, AI concurred this test. We are done in accounting. We are done in medical. In 5 years, there is no point having humans. Why are we educating people? So you see the opposite. One group completely questioned the capability of AI. One group completely questioned the capability of human moving forward. And human AI symbiosis that both are actually helpful. They can give you some understanding, but both are misguided at the same time with their pure. It's the middle.
Yeah.
Right? Moving forward is the middle. And this is not just normative in my research. I'm not saying this is the ethical position. I think this is the reality. Even if, so in my research, I look at efficiency. Efficiency can hurt organization in the long term because you see humans as cogs in the machine. And when you kick them out, their tacit knowledge is gone. Machine learning in organizational contexts, in my knowledge, does not mean anything if it doesn't translate to human learning. So human AI symbiosis means they need to work together. They are indispensable, and the system should be better than both.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a great way to
I
think
like
about it.
that. Yeah.
And one thing, can I throw another thing to this mix? I always,
Yes.
I think when I push human AI symbiosis, I also dispense with some other visions that are actually very prevalent. Human in the loop. I do not like that vision. Why? Because it's like we created the loop, we put human in it. Human is an appendage. We bring human back, and that's not just a theory. That's how it is presented. We bring human to take the bullet, the accountability. It's for responsibility, we throw in a human to the end-to-end AI system design. It's not, do you see what I mean? Human in the loop is design, human is an afterthought.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I want to thank you so much for speaking with us. It was extremely enlightening and learned a whole lot.
That one.
I
Yeah, me
appreciate
too. Yeah, thank you so much. I really love what you're saying and how you see things, because it's helpful to see it, and we need, as we have those conversations, because what you said is really important, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching or listening to The Internet is Crack. Tune in next week when we have another great conversation about robotics, AI, and the internet. You can watch us or listen to us on YouTube or Spotify or many other outlets. And don't forget to follow us on social media. See you next Monday.